Make sure your insurance doesn't come up short. Get gap cover with ALA. For more information, follow the links in the description.
Hello everybody. When it launched back in 2013, the Jaguar F-Type was a car that I simply didn't get. First off, to me it lost the looks of its predecessor, the timeless elegance that a Jaguar should always possess. Yet, on the other hand, it clearly was still far too heavy to be a genuine sports car. The V6 engine was an engineering abomination, and the V8 had so much power it couldn't get it to the ground. The noise was contrived, the interior full of oddities, and it just felt like a car which to me was half-baked. However, the years were kind to the F-Type, and so when it was retired in 2014, I and many others shed a tear, because by that point I'd really fallen for it. Though it was still a car never quite perfect, and though the looks grew on me, the drive I appreciated, and the coupe was certainly more practical than the convertible they first launched, there's one thing about the F-Type I just never got: the V6. And so today, for the first time in almost a decade, I'm driving one yet again. It's been brought to me by its 21-year-old, when he bought it, owner, Ben. And he feels not only is this a car that should erase my previous notions of the V6 F-Type, this might actually be the best one in the lineup. Is it? We'll find out in today's episode of JayEmm on Cars.
A special thank you to today's sponsor, Nove Watches. A small company run by fellow petrolheads, Nove produces Swiss-made wristwear at affordable prices, with designs inspired by the world of road, sea and air. In today's video, you will see me wearing their range-topping Modena 500, a limited edition inspired by the world of the Italian automobile. For more information on it and the full Nove Watches range, check out nove.com. And for a JayEmm exclusive discount, use my code in the description down below.
So, as today's episode is going to be very engine-centric, let's get straight to the point and tell you why it is I have never liked the V6 that Jaguar put in this car and a few others. It is called the AJ126 and is a close relative of the mighty 5-litre V8, which, as it happens, is one of my all-time favourite engines. And making a V6 from a V8, or sometimes vice versa, is not at all uncommon. It does tend to lead to some engineering compromises, like for example the bank angle here being 90 degrees, where a V6 really would want to be either 60, 120 or 180. However, the biggest issue for me is that with this engine, rather than just cut off the entire end of a V8, what they did was stuck V6 heads onto a V8 block. So open the beautiful and front hinged bonnet of an F-Type and you will see below the plastic cover on the V6, 6 cylinders sat on space for 8. The engine still has a crankshaft that is 4 cylinders long. Worst of all, the remaining 6 cylinders are at the front of the car. So if you did go and buy yourself a Jaguar F-Type with a V6, you didn't get the power of a V8, you didn't get the noise of a V8, nor did you get any kind of benefit in terms of handling, because the thing still weighed basically the same with the weight in the same place, and you didn't really save much in terms of fuel either. To top it off, the early V6s were also somewhat problematic. However, that was then and this is now. What I'm driving today is the 400 Sport, the very last of the supercharged V6s. As you might imagine, it makes 400 horsepower, and there were a few other tweaks to the model too, designed to make this the car for the purist, the person not impressed by big numbers, instead the man or woman who wanted themselves the best driving experience. So, is that what we've got? Well, let's pop the car into dynamic mode, the gearbox into sport and manual, open the exhaust valves, and let's find out. Now there is a huge amount to like about a Jaguar F-Type. Like I said, the looks really did grow on me. And here with the 400 Sport, you got a treatment that was a little bit sharper than in the regular car. You have a few elements in a stealthy grey finish, there's an aggressive splitter at the front, some yellow 400 badging, bespoke 20-inch alloy wheels, and some other touches too. On the interior front, you'd get this yellow 400 badging, and in many of them, also yellow contrast stitch on the leather. The carbon fibre you see in here is not standard, but just about the rest of it is. And you could have ordered your 400 Sport in a number of different guises. So you could have either the coupe, as we have it here, with 2 seats and a very usable boot, or the convertible with 2 seats, soft top, and a far less usable boot. Naturally, that carried a bit of a weight penalty too, although no F-Type is particularly light. The most lithe of all of them, ignoring things like the Project 7, is around the 1700 kilo mark. This one, which has the optional all-wheel drive, available for both the coupe and convertible, is likely closer to 1800. All of them then came with this 8-speed ZF automatic gearbox, which it has to be said is very good indeed. I know that Jaguar did dabble with a manual gearbox, but they kind of confused everybody by not putting it in the models that you'd really expect to have one. Like this. Build the sportiest F-Type ever, and then don't put in the gearbox that appeals to sports car drivers. That's British car maker logic for you. Although, having not tried one, I can neither confirm nor deny, rumour has it the manual gearbox just isn't that good. Visibility in here is actually pretty good. There is no reversing camera, there are however reversing sensors, and that's one of a number of things that's just a little bit strange about this car. It's another thing that always annoyed me about the F-Type. The specification of them is very, very odd indeed. So this one has a heated steering wheel, but not heated seats. It does have electric adjustment and memory for them at least. The insult though is the climate control, because this car does not have the dual zone. Instead, it's still got 2 dials with displays in them for each of the zones, but they're linked. It's just software. And I would have thought with this, the 400 Sport, there was an opportunity for Jaguar to do that classic thing when you're trying to shift a model. Chuck more features at it, give owners better value for money and encourage them into the car. However, as it was, the 400 Sport was a £6,000 upgrade over the equivalent R-Dynamic of the 380 horsepower version. And in terms of performance, you didn't get any more torque, still 339 pounds-feet, that's 460 newton-meters. You did get 20 more horsepower, but that was not enough to change any of the performance metrics. So your 0 to 60 time was still dispatched with in just about 5 seconds, either slightly under or slightly over, depending on your spec, and the top speed was a quoted 171 mile an hour. Adequate for sure, but also unlikely to impress your potential BMW M4 owner who could have bought their car new for less. One of these would have set its first owner back just shy of 75 grand. Though, for that money, you did at least get much better brakes. Now 380mm discs at the front and 376 at the back. And they're very good indeed, with both good power and feel from the pedal. That exhaust also is just as daft as ever, with the switch down here not feeling like it really does much at all, and whether you've got it valve open or shut, it still cracks and pops in a way that's frankly unbecoming of a Jaguar. The way it goes down a road though, certainly better. Now you have selectable driving modes here, and every F-Type came with adaptive dampers as standard. In normal mode, the ride is perfectly fine. You've then got wet weather beyond that, should you need it, rain, ice and snow mode, which does blunt everything quite significantly, and, for the sporty experience, dynamic. That ramps up the firmness of the suspension, changes the profile of the gearbox, throttle, so on and so forth. And apparently there are handling changes made for the 400 Sport bespoke to the model. However, in all of my research, I couldn't find anything actually stating definitively what the changes made for the car were. So there's a good chance it is simply a case of retuned software. Whatever the case may be, if you want to make progress, it's a very pleasant thing, and it is set up really well to be a very enjoyable car at road legal speeds. The V8, which when this car was out, made 550 horsepower and of course a ton more torque. And that made it not just a leery so-and-so if you went for the two-wheel drive variant, all-wheel drive having come in by the time this was released, but also one that did require some considerable attention and restraint to not get yourself into license-losing territory. This you can certainly work harder for longer, and I think still very much enjoy. And here's the thing, I've never really disliked this engine because of how it feels. I've always disliked this engine because of what it is. It is to me a great big massive reminder that Jaguar were trying to cut a huge corner in an area of the car that is key for anybody that's going to buy something like this. You buy a sports car and it's all about the engine. To then know that the engine you've got is a huge compromise and brings with it, as far as I'm concerned, only downsides and no benefits, I'd find that hard to live with. But that's not to say you can't have fun with it. Ben now being just 23, this is also the kind of car where I think having a bit less power is a very good thing. And in truth, if you want to find those extra 20 horses, they are buried at the top of the rev range. Even so, it's still a relatively muscular thing thanks to the supercharger. And I always found it a little bit odd that this was Jaguar's solution as opposed to just building us a version of the V8 without the supercharger. That I think would have been awesome, and I understand that the reason they made this not just a V6 but a 3-litre was to meet market regulations elsewhere, where they'd get big tax benefits for having a smaller engine. But that isn't the case here, or indeed many other markets. So it always felt strange to me. Yeah, build this engine, but don't sell it to the Brits. Now the 400 Sport was a 1-year only deal. They built it for just 2018, knowing that in 2019 the model was going to be facelifted and the range rationalised. So the V6 was discontinued entirely, leaving then the 4-cylinder, the 300 horsepower variant, and different flavours of the V8. Still supercharged, there was a new 450 horsepower variant and the 575 taking over from the old SVR. I have to say, I do quite like driving this car. I know a Cayman is going to be dynamically miles ahead of this. It's just vastly superior, lighter, near enough as pokey, but even if it's not, the weight difference more than makes up for it, has a different balance and feel because it's mid-engined, a suspension setup that is far more sporting, yet doesn't really feel too compromised. This at low speeds does feel just a little bit too firm, particularly in dynamic mode. When you're on the go, it's just about okay, but to me, for a Jag, I don't know. I suppose this does get a little bit of a free pass on account of being the Sport. Comparisons with an M4 I thought were always a little bit unfair because that really is a completely different class of car. It's a big coupe which has 4 proper seats in it. The 911 again was then a bit more expensive and of course quite capable too, but then it should be. It's more money from a more established manufacturer. We have to remind ourselves, in the entirety of its production run, Jaguar sold just shy of 88,000 F-Types. In a good year, Porsche would have built that many Macans. That's criminal. But I suppose serves to make the F-Type just that little bit more special. And you are always going to get a good reception as a Jag owner. And as his first sports car, Ben is loving every single minute with the F-Type. To the extent that, in spite of the fact he still owns his old car, a diesel Mercedes C250, he has found himself driving this at every given opportunity. And he's now put on 20,000 miles in the 18 months that he's had it. Good lad. Fuel in these is not particularly excellent, and insurance, in case you're wondering, for a young lad is very expensive. Less than the equivalent Porsche or BMW, but not by much. Unfortunately, he did have a non-fault claim from a few years ago, and his first year with this cost £4,000. I've always been rather confused by young people that spend that much on insurance. When I was young, all I wanted was a car that was cheap. I certainly couldn't afford to buy anything like this. I couldn't even have afforded the insurance on this. But hey ho, times have changed, and I guess the £2,000 I paid on insurance 15, 20 years ago is probably closer to this amount than I'd really like to admit. Tax will vary for these depending on the year, but after the insurance it's going to be relatively easy. In the time he's had it, it's been fairly reliable, the only exception being an O2 sensor that failed. The F-Type certainly did have its fair share of issues, many of which are well documented, but most of which weren't that bad. And here in Britain at least, there is a good network of specialists where you can take the car. And so, if you are thinking of buying an F-Type, is the 400 Sport worth getting? Well, not really. You see, if you just want a cheap F-Type, you can pick them up now for less than £20,000, which is mad. Of course, they're not going to be as good as this. They'll have miles on. They'll probably be the 340, the base one of the day. However, 400 Sports, by virtue of being a later limited run car, they still command a fair bit of money. About £30,000, starting price up to about 36. And for that, you can get yourself into a selection of V8s. And that's the route I would go. And as a younger driver with less experience, I would say that this is the right choice for Ben. For me though, it's got to be the 8. That engine and all of its power and torque bring with it a totally different character for the car, and to then mean it's something you don't want to compare with a 911 or a Cayman. Instead, it's got that muscle car vibe. And it still drives brilliantly. The steering feel in these is good, the chassis is actually pretty adept. It's an excellent thing to hustle down a B road. It's a cut-price Ferrari F12. Where does Ben go from here? Well, I said the Lexus LC500. But for you, all I'd ask you to do is head over to the comment section instead and tell me what you think. And don't forget, hit that like button as well, or dislike if you've not enjoyed today's video. I can take it. And the subscribe button as well. Makes a big difference to me, and this year I'm desperate to get to the 500,000 mark. And with that, thank you, bye-bye, and I'll see you for the next one.